What started as a Saturday morning coffee date turned into a podcast where we chat about things like faith, family, finances, and so much more.
In a world that is encouraging you to live your truth and to follow your heart, we want to encourage you to live devoted to the truth.
The Bible has a lot to say about how to live a victorious Christian life, and we want to share practical insight in how to apply those truths to your life as we endeavor to apply them to our own lives as well.
If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a review and share these episodes with your friends so that you can help them live this devoted life too. Welcome to another episode of This Devoted Life podcast. We had a really fun weekend with our family this weekend. Our son turned 11.
11. Oh, my goodness.
I'm starting to feel really old. You said I'm not allowed to say that, but with each birthday our kids have, I really do start feeling older and older.
Yeah, it is a little tough. I mean, to think we are already in the second month of 2024 alone.
And you turned 40 this year.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the 30s are just a springboard into my 40s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the launching pad to the best decade of my life.
I had someone tell me, actually, it was my cousin. She said when I was turning 30, I was kind of like, oh my goodness, I'm turning 30. She said, no, the 30s are the best years of your life. And so far, I have to agree with her. I would not have gone back to my 20s at all. I love my 30s, and I do look forward to 40.
I was going to say, I really agreed with her a decade ago, but now I actually disagree. I think the 40s are definitely where it's at. Yeah.
So anyways, we had a fun weekend as a family as our son turned 11. Usually we try to do a birthday party for our kids. Sometimes it's just with family. We'll have all the family come over. Sometimes we have friends. Usually if it's a big milestone birthday, like they turn 10 or whatever.
Last year we had a lot bigger of a birthday party.
Yeah, where we invited a bunch of friends and stuff for them over. But this week we decided to do something a little bit different, and we thought we'd share it with you because, there can be so much pressure with what you see online to think that you have to do these big things for your kids. And I guess when we shared this, maybe you'll laugh and be like, that's kind of a big thing for your kid. But we decided to do more of an experience with our family this weekend. We didn't invite anyone else along. It just was the six of us. And we've kind of been getting into golf. If you've listened to previous episodes from last year, you know we did a lot of golfing last year. And we decided to go to a place called Topgolf, which was so much fun.
It was a great time.
I don't even know how to describe it other than it kind of felt a little bit like a mesh between golf and bowling. Like it kind of had that feel where you could order lunch and you could golf at the same time. They had these heated booths that you were in. So the kids, they didn't have to wear jackets or anything. It was still technically open because you're hitting into this
you're
dome.
Outdoors. Well, it's actually not even a dome. It's just like kind of a netted in area. It's totally outdoors. But yeah, like you said, we were outside, but it was t-shirt weather in Michigan in February. So.
Right. And so there's just this heated place and we were able to order lunch together. And what made it really fun was you could play games. It's not like your normal golfing. They had these nets, targets that you would aim at, or the balls are chipped so that it can track the trajectory and how far they go.
Microchips in them. And,
So we played Angry Birds in golfing, and you could set the different levels. So for our younger kids, we put them on easy. You put me on intermediate. I think you were on difficult. And so our 7-year-old and 5-year-old were beating us in
legitimately
Angry Birds.
in the scores. Like they would literally place first of the, actually 5 of us because our youngest didn't play. But it was a great time. And, some of you might be saying, we've been going to Topgolf for, 5 or 6 years now or whatever. But it was our first experience, and it was a great experience. And the people there, the workers, they made it like a very fun and just easy experience. And they, brought out a few special things for our son's birthday, which we hadn't planned that ahead of time or even really told them. I mean, when we got there, we mentioned, hey, we're here for our son's birthday. But they made it a great experience, and it was all skill levels there. And I mean, there were our 5-year-old, is kind of just, trickling it off the platform
and
there
having an absolute blast.
Yeah.
So the only reason that we shared this was, one, if you've never done Top Golf and you think that would be something your family would love, 10 out of 10 recommend it as far as like our one and
no
only experience.
affiliation, no sponsorships, just it was a good time.
Yeah. And if you ever feel the pressure, to do these elaborate birthday parties, sometimes just doing an experience is the way to go.
Yeah.
And I think you had said, when we were talking about this episode was, if you hike every day as a family, then maybe going on a hike as a family wouldn't be that special thing, but it could be. Like if you don't normally go out on a family hike, that could be your thing. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It just needs to be something memorable and different.
Yeah, like we ended up going to Legoland afterwards and the Sea Life experience and stuff. But it was just mostly because they're literally all, right kind of next to each other. And
our 11-year-old asked to go to Legoland, and I was kind of like, we were there a few years ago and whatever. And James said, he was like, you do realize our 11-year-old will probably not be asking to go to Legoland many more years. Yeah. And I was like, oh, way to drive it into my heart. Like,
well, it is. It's, that adolescence time, I mean, we all went through it, right? So you just slowly, those things become less fun and, that's for babies or that's for whatever. And like, I mean, I still had fun at Legoland.
Oh, totally.
So, I mean, it's for everybody, but at the same time, it becomes less and less cool for a teenage boy to go do things with his family on, certain experiences and whatnot. So yeah, I was like, let's promote this, let's endorse it in his mind. And if we can make it happen, let's do it.
Yeah. So I guess we say all this to say we're all about making memories as a family and are huge supporters of do something out of the ordinary, do something special to create that. What do they call it now? A core memory, you know, for your kids, something that just stands out in their mind.
Yeah. And again, if it's something that where, birthday parties are a huge tradition for your family and it would be, a terrible idea to break the mold, obviously keep doing those things. But, we went the extra mile last year and had, I don't know, there's 40 plus people or whatever.
It was a big birthday.
And we, went and kind of had a cool experience then too, but it was, with a big group. And this year we're like, we're just going to do a family thing and make a memory with that. And, he's with his friends all the time and stuff like that. So, it was something that we had fun with. And again, just to drive home the point, whatever level of spend, whatever you have in your budget, whatever, like none of that matters. It's all about, just having fun as a family and creating those experiences. And, like Shanda alluded to, if you do something all the time as a family, just think about something else that you can do, maybe something that you've had on a list for, a year or two that you thought, hey, we should really do that. Well, maybe a birthday of one of your children is an opportunity to go and do that thing and try that out. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we kind of drove that point home. So let's move on. So James loves to listen to podcasts and he's constantly coming home with different ideas. He's one of those people who loves to glean information, whether he takes it and applies it to himself personally or just kind of tucks it away. Like if you ever want to have someone play Jeopardy with you, he's probably the person to have on your team because
thanks.
He there's a bunch of just random information in his head. But anyways, the reason that you have all that random information is because you're constantly learning. And so
podcasts, audiobooks, YouTube, just regular books, anything. I love listening to people talk, life stories. I learned so much random things from just talking to people and listening. And all of those little interactions in life can be so valuable in so many ways. So sorry, I just had to
you're good. So you came home, what was it, maybe 4 weeks ago? I don't remember when this podcast aired, but he was like, babe, I listened to this podcast by Joe Rogan and Gary Brecka.
Yep.
I had never heard of Gary Brecka prior to this moment, but he was like, I think we really need to sit and listen to this together. Yeah. So we sat one evening. It was like a 2.5-hour podcast. We listened to it on 1.5 times.
Yeah,
so if you ever listen to podcasts and you want to get through them faster, listen to them on a faster speed.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before, but I usually never listen to anything in less than 1.5, and 2x is probably pushing it for most people, unless they talk really slow. But yeah, so for whatever that's worth, we will not be offended if you listen to us on 1.75 and just glean all that information in a shorter period of time.
Right. Anyways, I digress. I should say, when you brought up this podcast, I was at first kind of like, I don't know if I want to sit here and be listening to this, but I can genuinely say that at the end of that podcast, my mind was blown.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much information that I had never even heard before. It wasn't even on my radar.
And you're pretty into like healthy and crunchy things, at least aware of them and stuff.
So this podcast was on the gene mutation of MTHFR, which I had heard that kind of being thrown around in some of the crunchy mom circles, that I navigate every now and then. But I didn't really know what it was. It didn't seem to affect me at the time. So I didn't really spend a ton of time really researching what that gene mutation actually was.
Yep.
And so as I was listening to this podcast, Gary Brecka was talking about how around 40% of the population has the gene mutation MTHFR. And he said that basically the key component to that is that though people who have that specific gene mutation are unable to process folic acid properly, meaning your body doesn't take the folic acid and turn it into methylated folate.
Yep.
And the reason that is a bad thing is because it can trigger immune responses within your system. So for instance, as I'm listening to this, I'm going, I am a poster child for this as far as like a woman goes, because someone who has the MTHFR gene mutation struggles with infertility, likely.
Many can.
They also are more likely to have postpartum depression. 3 out of 4 of our children, I had postpartum depression. And so as I'm listening to him talk, I'm going, man, I am checking all the boxes on this. I didn't even know what this is. And he explained that the reason that it's a problem specifically in the United States is because all of the grains that are non-organic are sprayed with folic acid.
So I apologize because I should have gone back and done the research to give you the actual facts and data on this. But I think Gary mentioned that it was either 70s, 80s, maybe early 90s, that the federal government, the U.S. federal government, mandated that all grains get sprayed with folic acid. And it was, touted as a very healthy thing. And maybe it is, in some respects, but it brought on this whole side effect that, really...
That 40% of people couldn't process that.
And so folate, everyone can process, but not folic acid.
Correct. Yeah, and what is the number one thing that doctors tell women when they get pregnant? You need to start taking folic acid. Why is postpartum depression so high right now among women? It's not solely responsible for the folic acid. I don't believe that that's the only reason.
But it sure seems to be a large contributing factor.
It can be, yes. And so I just, as I'm listening to this podcast, I just was like, my mind is blown. I had never heard of these things. I didn't know that was even a possibility. And so as I'm listening to it, I was like, okay, what are the things that I can do with this information right now? And it was one of those things where I was like, okay, I can now apply this to what I'm eating. What I'm going to do now is try to limit my exposure to non-organic grains, right? And the other thing that Gary Brecka talked about was that you can start taking what's called methylated folate, which is the good form of folate, which is the good form of folate. And that is the form that your body is able to process. And if I'm remembering correctly, that methylated folate actually helps flush the folic acid out of your system because it helps reduce that overload of folic acid in your system. And so we're sharing this today because it was just something that really, like I had said, I keep saying mind blown, but it was something that really impacted me because it affected me personally. I was like, okay, this is new information. This is something that I can apply to my life now.
Yeah. And, like some of the other takeaways for me is, again, whether it's this podcast or others that you listen to, some books you read, listen to, whatever it is, again, it's not that I never get entertainment. It's not that I dislike entertainment. But my goodness, I think there's so much information out there that I love it. I consume it all the time. I actually get a little bit bummed when I kind of learn or catch up on all the things that have been of interest to me lately. And I'm kind of looking for that next thing just to learn about. And so, again, some of the takeaways on this one are all forms of grain bad for me? No, there are actually some natural organic grains that are. I haven't taken or had the methylated genetic testing done yet. I'm, hoping to here shortly. But, is folic acid bad for me? I don't know yet, but I at least am aware that it could be and that it could be affecting me. It could be affecting you. And so you learn these things and then do your own research on how it affects you or maybe doesn't affect you. And I don't know. I love it. I love being a little more equipped to making better decisions for me and you and our family, and to just kind of share things that are of interest to us or that we're learning and that are maybe moving the needle a little bit in our lives. Because, the millennial generation is the largest generation since, we're a bunch of boomer babies. And so we're going through all these things, and it's hard to kind of wade through the minutia of information. But again, I think, if we learn from each other, it's just really powerful.
Yeah. And as Christians, like as I'm consuming this information, I'm like, okay, one, I don't need to be angry about this. I don't need to be fearful about this.
Yeah.
I can take the information that I've been given. I can change what I can within our budget, within our lifestyle, within whatever my means are. And then I can trust God with the rest of it.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we share information, it is never to cause fear. It's never to cause like anger at our government or whatever,
Actually, the opposite. It's like, let's break this down and weed out what we can impact or influence.
Yes. Yeah. What can you do with the information you've just been given?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
The future is bright.
It is. Are you going to say that every episode now?
Yeah. It's actually, I can't take full credit for it. Patrick Bet David, that's like one of his big sayings right now. So if any of you kind of listen to him, that's one of his things this year. So 2024, the future is bright.
You do listen to a ton of podcasts. And so I think there was another one that you just recently listened to. This is going to be a totally different take on something else that you were listening to. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it was a hunting-based podcast, but this is another little thing. And again, it's not like it's, what did Brian used to say? This ain't NASA science. This ain't NASA science over here. So.
Brian being a very Southern gentleman that he used to work with when we lived in Tennessee.
He was great. Yeah, I loved him. But this podcast, they were talking about hunting, and there's this whole like movement in the hunting industry where they talk about Instagram and social media a lot, where people post grip and grins, they call it. So someone shoots an animal that's a large, trophy animal per se, and they'll take a picture and they're really happy, whatever, they'll post it on social media. And then other hunters will get really jealous and they'll start bashing these people, whether they're in the social media circles, they're an influencer or whatever. So they just start bashing them like, oh yeah, they probably shot it in a, high fence ranch and all these things, which may or may not mean anything to you, but there's like 100% fair chase versus not, and all these different, pieces and parts of hunting in the hunting industry. But when they were talking about it on this podcast, it got me thinking, a lot of times that's how we are just in general, really it has nothing to do with hunting, but it's just the human nature to maybe see something or hear about something and to become very jealous.
Mhm.
And honestly, we run into this infighting a lot in Christian circles as well.
Mm.
And again, I'm not saying that, like, there are convictions. We've talked about those on previous podcast episodes. There are convictions and preferences, and you should never waver from biblical convictions. Those are things to, stand up for and
Mhm.
to, again, make a priority in your life. However, if you're just bashing the person that's sitting down the pew from you on a Sunday, and you are creating these gossip circles in your church or in your circles in your community, and they're just rooted in jealousy, like, who does that help?
Mhm.
All you're doing is trying to cut down that other person and build up yourself. And it's just very, it can be very damaging.
Mhm.
One of the, or there's a, let's call it a quote or a saying that says, jealousy is the poison which kills the vessel that carries it.
Ooh, that's good.
It is. And, if you actually sit there and think about it, jealousy is the poison which kills the vessel that carries it. So when I'm jealous, in theory, there are ways that you can kind of hurt other people. Like you said, you're posting and kind of there's defamation towards that other person. However, you're hurting yourself the most,
Mhm.
and it is a poison in your life. It gets you. I call it the race to the bottom.
Mhm.
Like, I want to be on the race to the top. I want to be on the race to fulfillment. I want to be on the race to joy and happiness and adding value to people's lives. And if I am consumed by jealous thoughts, and I become the victim or the martyr or whatever it is, it's not helping anybody. It's
Mm-mm.
definitely not helping me. It's definitely not helping the person that I'm jealous toward.
Mhm.
And it's probably not helping, your family or the people around you. And a lot of times, unhealthy feelings, just they become you become inactive,
Mhm.
and you can withdraw, and you can kind of go inside your mind and inside yourself and really become kind of a recluse. Even if you're not physically a recluse, emotionally or
Mhm.
mentally or spiritually, you become one, and that can be damaging.
Mhm.
It can lead to depression and all of these things. Or you can be like a wounded animal backed into a corner and start lashing out at people
Mhm.
and things like that. And all of these things really just end up, specifically when it comes to jealousy, end up making kind of you look worse, which is really the opposite of what
Mhm.
you started out seeking. You
Mhm.
started seeking attention, putting down the other person, maybe seeking some attention to make you look better, but it really doesn't. So again, I'll kind of get off my little soapbox and stop preaching, but at the same time, I do think that can just consume people.
Mhm.
And it can be financial, it can be spiritual, it can be all of them.
Mhm.
And you get into this trap, you fall into this trap where it's just an unhealthy cycle. And it, like I said, especially, this podcast is mostly based around marriage and family, parenting,
Mhm.
things like that. So I'll call out all of you men, your husbands and fathers. I mean, man alive, don't let that become something that consumes you,
Mhm.
because and I think again, we as men, we try to cut down someone else to create the status, or we try to say things or not say things that build ourselves up, and puts down the other person if we fall into those jealous cycles.
Mhm.
But on the opposite, think about how empowering it is when someone says an encouraging word to you and they respect you for what you do, or sometimes what you don't do. And that can be so energizing and build up both
Mhm.
people that, you might be in a circle with. And you can accomplish so much more. So kind of bringing this back, again, it was kind of a hunting-based podcast. However, it really is applicable to so many different areas in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible talks about how our words need to be to the use of edifying one another. And so if your words that you're using, whether it's in person or online, because in the online world that I am in, it's not just the men who are cutting each other down, it's the women too, because I think we all can tend towards that very easily. And I think that's why the Bible talks so much about our words. It's because we need to be very careful with what we're saying with our tongue. And so unless what we're saying is used to edify and to build up someone else, it probably shouldn't be said, right?
As someone knocking on the door to my 40s, I wasn't going to say anything about calling you women out.
You're learning.
I'm speaking from experience here.
No,
I'm totally kidding. But it's a great point. Like you said, it's just so easy. And I'm not preaching from a point of where I never deal with this or I never.
We all deal with it.
Yes, exactly. That's why it really hit home to me and rang true, is just because it's like, wow, these are things where you have to suppress that voice, in your life and in your spirit, where it's like, oh no, I recognize you. I'm not letting you pop in.
Right.
I'm not giving you a room in my mind right now. And if you keep it at bay, that jealousy, man, it's just so freeing and it's so energizing to just, take action on something that is important to you and that's maybe something you strive towards, and use other people's success as motivation rather than something to, pit your jealousy against.
Yeah, the whole time you were talking, I was actually sitting here going, okay, so what is the thing that combats that, right? So what is the one thing that we can do that will actually combat the jealousy bug? Because when you get bit by the jealousy bug, it's really hard to
you spiral downward.
And the whole time you were talking, I was like, the thing that combats that is gratitude, right?
Yes.
When we are thankful for what we have been given, when we are thankful for the lungs or the breath that is in our lungs, when we are thankful for just everything that we have been given, we won't be as jealous of our brother and sister in Christ, right?
Yep.
The Bible tells us to give thanks in all things.
Yeah, totally.
And when we have a thankful heart, it's really hard to have a jealous heart.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So again, thanks for listening. That was something that just really spoke to me, and I thought maybe it would be something that would be applicable to anyone here. But those are things where, again, it doesn't matter really kind of what genre you're listening to or paying attention to. I feel like we can learn so many applicable things just in our everyday life.
Especially when you're filtering things through God's word.
Yes.
So whatever you hear, whether it's secular or Christian or whatever, you need to know God's word so well that you can filter what you are hearing.
Yes.
Take the meat off the bones, spit out the bones, and then apply it to your life.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just something... the hunting has nothing to do with it.
Yep.
It's literally that you were given just that little thing from God in this secular podcast, and you're like, wow, I can apply this to my life in this way. And that's probably not what I would have taken from it, but that's fantastic.
Man, if you were in my head as I'm driving along, going to visit a project, and I'm listening to stuff, sipping on my coffee, and the caffeine's just a-flowing, man.
I do not think I want to be inside your head. I would be exhausted
you
all
would
day
be
long.
Exhausted, I could run through walls.
All right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add? I think this might be a wrap.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
I love, this is kind of a little bit of a replication of the conversations that we have all the time. And so, I hope, this was succinct and concise enough, but also applicable where you can, like you just said, kind of take it in and some meat to chew on.
Yeah, maybe
apply it
something to go research. You might be getting off this podcast going, I have no idea what MTHFR stands for, and I'm going to go figure out if I have this, So anyways, we hope that this was an encouragement to you. And until next time, we want to encourage you to seek God, love your spouse, hug your kids, and stay devoted. Thank you for tuning in to this Devoted Life podcast with James and Shanda. We appreciate your support in sharing biblical, uplifting truths with the world. If you found value in this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us to improve the show, and we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how to live a life devoted to God and family, head over to thisdevotedlife.com. You can also follow me, Shanda, on Instagram at devoted_motherhood. Thank you again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time on This Devoted Life podcast.